Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the panel today on AI and product management. We're closing the day today here at Amii HQ, so we're going to close it on a high note. My name is David Chan. I'm the product owner / lead of the industry team here at Amii. We work a lot with clients that are pretty early on in their AI journey, and we help them take their first steps in the right direction on that front. So I'm really excited to be introducing the topic and the panelists for today. I think it's a really timely panel. We were just chatting that, we've spoken about AI and product management before 3 years ago, so why are we doing this again? But luckily, and I think because it's so timely, the answers from 3 years ago have changed quite a bit. So we might even do a little bit of a look back here today to see how things have evolved. I do think it's really timely. AI development has come a long way, and it's easier than ever to tie in AI into your products, but let's talk about if, how, and when you should be doing that today. On the flip side, AI as a tool itself can really affect product management as well, I think, and really curious to hear what all our panelists today have to say about that. And I'm really excited to have all three of you here today, so thank you to the three of you for joining us today. We have Leah, Forrest, and Nathan, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves in a second here. The format of the panel is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to go through introductions, we're going to have a few questions for the panelists, and then at the end we'll have roughly 15 minutes for questions. So as we go through, please make note of your questions, and we'd love to hear from you at the end. So without further ado then, I'll pass it off to you, Leah, for your introduction.
Hello. I wasn't sure if this was going to work or not. Hi, I'm Leah Elzinga. I'm the Senior Product Manager at Telus for the API Marketplace, which is basically like the beating heart of Telus right now. I also lead their Women in Tech community there, their product community of practice, and I'm really excited to let you all know that I'm reclaiming my role as the chapter lead for Canada Learning Code here in Edmonton.
Awesome.
Hey everybody, I'm Forrest. I'm CTO and founder of Jobber, a local Edmonton company that's been around for about 13 years now, come October. We build business management software for home service businesses, so painters, landscapers, window washers. We help them run their businesses a little better, everything from the quoting and estimating through scheduling to the final invoicing. So a very broad footprint of a product with a very targeted customer base.
Hey everyone, I'm Nathan. I'm the product lead at Harvest Venture Builders. We're a company focused on helping startups scale through access to capital and access to talent. I've been a product manager for just a bit over 10 years, working with all sizes of companies from 2 people to 250 people. And I'm also leading up Product Edmonton now. So keep an eye out for new updates on Product Edmonton chats if you like our conversation today.
Awesome, thank you very much. And so really excited to hear from all your backgrounds. I'm excited that we have folks with so many years of experience under their belts and also from diverse backgrounds as well. So maybe to set the baseline, let's start off pretty simple, hopefully simple. So what do you see as the difference when it comes to product management for like traditional product management compared to working on AI products?
We'll go left to right.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's quite a few things that make it a little bit different. But if you really think about it, like going back to what makes a product person, you're focused on building the right thing, and so you got to take into account your usual things, your technical discovery, your value to your customer, your estimations, and how you're going to communicate that roadmap to people. And when you incorporate AI into that, it really impacts how you kind of go about those things. So when you're taking a look at the collaboration aspect, one of the biggest things that changes is now you have to actually, not just incorporate, the needs of your developers and your designers, but now your data teams, your data engineers, your AI engineers, ML engineers, whatever you have there, to incorporate like how much effort and how much work is going to go into the things that you are building. When you're thinking about your customers and the value that you're bringing to your customers, you have to think about the ethics, the explainable AI aspect of things. There's a lot there that goes into helping them understand, what goes into the data that you're using to, build the AI. There's an amount of trust and amount of expectation, right? So when you tell somebody like, oh, we have an AI for our product, immediately they think, 100% automation, 100% accuracy for whatever you're doing, and those things are really hard to achieve sometimes. So those are things that you have to incorporate from the product perspective. And then lastly, of course, when you're estimating how much this stuff is all going to build or how much it's going to cost, knowing all of those things as well too really changes compared to like traditional software, right? So, I think that's, if you're not familiar with, a product manager not familiar in the AI space, those are things that you have to kind of overcome and learn so that you can continue to do your job effectively, right? So, a couple things.
Yeah, I think a really important point is, again, it's all about picking up the right tool for the job. This AI is just another tool in the toolbox of a product manager, and it's one that you have to become very familiar with. So, you go back 15, 20 years ago, it was desktop software, and suddenly we had cloud, and PM suddenly had to become familiar with authentication because you had multi-tenant. You had to be thinking about the different browsers. You had to be thinking about, some of the speed and connectivity issues. Then mobile came around, and we had, connectivity and data amounts and all these new issues that came up. And these weren't bad issues. They unlocked a lot of opportunity for customers, but you had to just familiarize yourself and become really comfortable understanding how to make the most of this tool in the toolbox, and that you couldn't go and solve every problem with it, but for the right set of problems, it could really unlock a whole new range of capabilities. This is the same idea. And yes, as a PM, you'll have to start to think about the fact that your users are used to software behaving very predictably, giving the same answer every time. This is non-deterministic. It's hard to explain. How do you keep your customers engaged when, sometimes you'll get a great answer, but sometimes you get a weak answer, and you don't want them to suddenly lose faith. There's that whole uncanny valley. You're going to face cold start issues. The nature of this technology, the longer somebody's using your product, the more data you collect on them, probably the better, more value you'll be able to create for them. How do you show them enough value in the first 5 minutes that they're willing to stick around and keep using your product, that they're willing to give you all that data to help you give them the best value possible? These are all the types of challenges that, as PMs, we have to figure out. But it's a really exciting new tool at the same time.
Yeah, and to top up on that, I think it's important to know just about my background. So right now, the reason that I went to TELUS was not because I had some mad love for telecom. I don't care at all. But I don't. You can quote me, it's fine.
Very honest.
Yeah, well, I don't. But it's because I wanted to expand my skill set, and what they were building was dev tools. Dev tools typically do not get love, right? So I love developers. I work really well with them. And one of the interesting things in our space is the way that AI is helping us resolve constraints that were just a given before and have been a given my entire career. So there were things like, integrations equal bad, right? Using multiple different types of tools to do the same job. So at a company of our scale, we're 100,000 people, we're in 59 countries, 136 languages. We would often try to be like, we're going to pick one communications tool for everybody. We're going to pick one cloud artifact for everyone. Everybody's going to be on the same cloud platform. That doesn't have to happen anymore. We're able to do things like control our entire networks and just resolve problems that we couldn't before. And one of the really, really cool things for me, and I think the opportunity that I'm seeing, and something that should hopefully scare everybody that's a smaller company, sorry guys, is that the things that used to slow the big companies down are getting solved through AI, right? Because it's all about speed. So if we can identify the patterns as product managers, I can sick bots on a lot of this stuff to resolve it. So the things that I used to not be able to do because we were just too big of a ship to turn around, all of a sudden I can turn the ship on a 360, a 0-point turn is now possible for really large ships, and I think that's really, really exciting in our space, especially at the scale that we're at.
Awesome. Thanks for all your responses. I think there's a ton to dig deeper on there. So maybe, Leah, I'll just piggyback off of what you just mentioned. You have experience in a number of different sized organizations, especially, and I think you mentioned earlier that you went from an organization that has roughly 5,000 employees to one that has over 100,000 employees. So how do things change when you go through that journey? And Forrest, really curious to hear from you as well, from your journey that you've gone through there with Jobber, in terms of product management and the challenges, and again, connecting to AI tools and how that might unlock productivity within your organization. Yeah,
I would say that not so much a challenge, but At the scale that we're at now, the opportunity is that we have so much firepower behind us and so many relationships that we're getting access to a lot of this technology before anybody else. And that's a major jump start. The challenge is making sure that you've got the right people having that access and continuing to advocate for it, because otherwise those opportunities are just going to die on the vine. Like there's a big five bank that shall remain unnamed here. But they were often described as like the place that like innovation went to die, because they'd have this innovation center. They would create all these incredible products and they would launch none of them. And that can't happen, right? We can't waste these sort of jump starts that we've got. And I'll say on the flip side, you know, when I was working at a slightly smaller organization, it was genuinely hard to even get people to understand. But I think just the focus, because at the scale I'm at now, the opportunities for AI are really almost more in terms of like our infrastructure, our architecture. Like that's where we're investing in terms of AI, as opposed to customer-facing products. There's just like way more money in it for us in terms of operationalizing our own practices. Whereas like when I was working in banking, it was all customer facing. So adoption was a much bigger concern for me, and like actually explaining how these things work and the trust issues and that kind of stuff. I don't have to talk about that now, but when I was working in banking, it was absolutely a concern for me. So just scale definitely matters there.
So I'm not clear if the question's about like just the discipline of PM in general, or how things have changed, or if specifically the application of AI. Maybe I'll start, actually, I guess people don't actually know what scale Jobber's at. So we've recently closed a Series D, 100 million US. We're about 600 employees now and growing. So thank you. So still a few, you know, magnitudes off of, you know, it's something to aspire for. Yeah, even just on the journey from, you know, 2 to 600, a few of the things that have really changed within the PM discipline. The bar for your V1 goes up quite a bit, right? Like early on, hacks, slash, you know, bugs, you just get things out the door, and if it's missing product market fit or it's a bit of a stinker, who cares? Because 5 people will look at it, you find out it's terrible, and you change it. As the quality of your overall product improves, you can't have just one thing that is so visibly much, much worse than the rest of your product. So even like, you know, we run things in labs and alphas. We'll go find 5 customers and get them early access to something. But anything that we're actually bringing to market just has a much higher bar right out the gate. You'll have to get much better at using data. You know, early on, you don't have any data. It's really easy. You're just operating purely off gut and, you know, 2 conversations you've had with the 2 people who agreed to talk to you. Once you're up to a couple 100,000 users, the usage of data and supporting your decisions and really digging through becomes a lot more important. And then stakeholder engagement. You know, as you know, everybody wants to be in the room making the decisions, but they can't be. But managing the relationships, keeping all the different departments in the loop, feeling involved, not slowing things down. It's as much, you know, it's more art than science, but that's something that the PMs that have managed to really grow with the organization and have. Like, that's a critical skill set that didn't really matter so much when everybody in the whole company could just turn their chairs around and have a conversation.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add on that. I think definitely when you're working at a small startup, you know, just like you said, you know, you just, whoever talks to you, the 2 or 5 people that are willing to talk to you, those are where you're getting your feedback loops from. You can't afford amplitude, you can't afford full story. You're just kind of scraping along with the feedback that you can get. I think that's probably one of the biggest things, and really trying to leverage that data as you grow and implement that data as you grow is one of the biggest challenges as a PM. The stakeholder management, I think that's one of the biggest things that really changes from smaller companies to bigger companies as well too. Like, you know, you don't really have a marketing team to lean off of to look at your market research. You don't have a sales team to figure out, you know, what your prospects are saying and where things should be going. So you kind of dig in and do those things yourself. But definitely, like, as you start getting past that threshold of product market fit, you build out your first, you get your first salesperson, you get your first marketing person, then you get to start having those stakeholder engagement conversations, and I think that's where things really start to come together for a PM, and I think that's, continues to grow and scale as the company grows, right?
So I thought I'd just do a final little top up on this particular topic. I think one of the real opportunities that smaller organizations have, though, that a larger organization doesn't, is though I can get things to market much faster and I can do those, 0-point turns, one of the things that's really, 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 really difficult to get buy-in on is experiments. Because even a tiny mistake when you're at this scale costs us millions of dollars. Just gone. Like, it's like the smallest, like a 10-minute outage is $10 million. Just in the air. Like that's a smaller company's entire budget for the year or for multiple years, right? So if you are working for a smaller organization, like take advantage of these opportunities to really experiment. And I'm talking like not like experiments like in pre-prod, like put this stuff to market. Like really push it as far as you can, because once you get to a certain scale, you really do start to lose that ability to do that. So that's definitely something to take advantage of at those smaller organizations.
Nathan, then maybe piggybacking off another thing that you alluded to in your first statement there. When it comes to AI, we often we know there is the concern around AI biases and things like that. So, what can a product manager do to try to mitigate those biases and make sure that products that are built are fair and inclusive as much as they can be?
Yeah, this one's a tricky one. One thing that I kind of like to go with is unequal outcomes are not the same as unfair outcomes when it comes to bias, right? So really taking a look into account, what you're trying to achieve, but also like where the data is kind of coming from. So for example, if you're trying to like predict what somebody's going to look like based off of their nationality, right? They're going to look a certain way based off of where they're from and their heritage, and that's okay. Like, and there's going to be a bias towards certain traits. There's going to be, people are going to come out looking a certain way. It's not equal, but it's fair, right? Whereas in other scenarios, there's definitely going to be a bias towards things that, like results that you don't want to have, or results that, if people are using a product, put them at a disadvantage over other people. And I think that's something that's really important as a PM when you're taking a look at that. Those are the things that you kind of have to predict beforehand or try to understand really quickly or respond to really quickly. What is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? Does the outcome align with your goals and your morals? And is that, more importantly, does the data that's coming from influence where that's coming from? Like, is the outcome the right thing based off of the data that you're seeing? Or is it skewing things in a way that's completely unfair to certain people or individuals? I think that's, just something that you have to stay cognizant of, right? So again, it's just another input that as a product person, you have to take into account and respond to, which makes it a lot more challenging than traditional software.
We've been spending a lot of time talking about a lot of the challenges like they're new challenges. Where, this is something product managers have always had to think about. The story that always comes back to my mind when this topic comes up was the very first airbags that were developed. Very unfortunately killed a number of women because all the engineers on the team that were building them were men, and they took their average height and weight when figuring out how powerful to make the airbags. Every product, this is something that always has to be considered by product managers, how to build inclusive products without bias that are better for the whole. Here there's a new axis, but at the same time, every product is so different, even every application of AI is so different, that I don't think there could be a blanket set of rules. I'd say the one best practice that's always true is having a diverse, inclusive team, because you're far more likely to spot the problems and have just more people thinking about from different perspectives and different lenses. But tactically, just awareness, like having your team aware that it is an issue you care about, culturally making it an important thing. And then the people working on the product have to figure it out on a case-by-case basis, because it's, everything's always different.
Yeah, so to that point, I actually ran a tiny little experiment. There's a challenge that I give to the people that I hire, and they're fully allowed to use whatever tools they want to solve the challenge. And it goes like this. Your director comes to you and tells you, build declarative config. And then there's a series of questions that come after it. And the long and the short of it is, I don't tell them what the hell a declarative config is. I don't give them any boundaries. I don't tell them who their director is, if they like them, if they don't, nothing, right? And you have to figure this out, which is hopefully for most of us in the room realize this is a very real life challenge, right? So just for shits and giggles, excuse my French, whatever, we're a safe space, right? So I challenged myself to it because that's fair's fair. And one of the very first thing that I did, I opened ChatGPT and I say, what is declarative config? And then just for the hell of it, I say, explain declarative config to me as if I were a man. And then I run the exact same test. And I say, explain declarative config to me as if I were a woman. And the two results were nearly identical, except the one for women had all of the jargon stripped out of it, which is very insulting. And ironically, I did this same test using Kong, which is just like one of our API platforms or gateways. And when I did it as a non-binary person, it would not recognize that it was an API platform. It refused to accept that it was anything other than King Kong. Like, even when I'd be like, no, 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 it's an API gateway. It's like, no, it's not. It's a movie. Like, oh my gosh. But part of this, honestly, is to your point, not just having diverse teams and like knowing and having good intentions. It's also catching it. It's raising it. It's actually doing things like submit those error reports, like actually do that stuff. But I am a huge advocate of like actually put your people through the training, like the formal training, not just like good intentions. Get the experts in the room to train them on bias, because we can't see it in ourselves. Like, look at the color of this panel, y'all. Does this look like supremely diverse to you? Like, come on, right? We can't see it, so you need outsiders to show you like the tools to identify your own bias first, so that you can catch it in other people's products and ideally get ahead of it. So get your companies to spend the money, long story short.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Another piece that came up is sort of, the different teams that you have to collaborate with. So it's not just sort of your traditional software development teams and things like that, but now you're sort of introducing all these other roles as well, like data scientists, machine learning engineers, machine learning scientists potentially, and so forth. Do you have any advice or best practices there for product managers in terms of, how do you interface with those teams, and how do you deal with that additional degree of complexity there?
Exactly the same way that you do with everybody else. And I mean that sincerely. I think this idea that some groups need more, better information than others is real dumb, right? Like, good quality products need all of these different practices. Like, your content writers need just as much information, and it needs to be just as clear. They need clear requirements. So do your designers, so do your architects, so does everybody. At every one of my interactions with my data scientists, the biggest thing was, what do you want to accomplish? Why do you want to accomplish it? How will you know that you're being successful? Those are the same things that the same sort of bullet points that I have in my head when I'm talking to anybody else. So it's almost like if you started with, if I had to explain this to a data scientist, and I know that they have a 3-week lead time, and I only have one chance to engage with them, how good can I make it? If we use that same approach for everybody else, our engagements would all be better. So just be a decent professional to everyone.
So true. When it comes to interacting with the data science team, I agree 100%. We don't have so many projects going on, though, that require like any crazy processes. Like, we have a centralized data science and data engineering team, and you get on their backlog, and then you spend time and work with them, and you give them the requirements and get the results. But the thing I'll throw out there is really pressuring if you need a data science team for the particular problem you're trying to solve. There are so many great APIs out there, so many great tools, so many great libraries. And this is going to become such a core aspect of development in the future that most engineers should be able to pick up some basic tools and solve the basic things. Like, you should only need data scientists if you're doing novel stuff or building completely new, sophisticated models. Like, I got a dozen engineers off the top of my head who can all just spin up TensorFlow and help do some basic stuff without us even touching the data science team.
And it's fun. They actually like it. Like, it's
Yeah.
a great time.
Yeah, they are so excited when
Something
I
different.
swoop in. It's like, I'm sorry, I have to break your sprint and take you onto the side project.
No.
Yeah, and it's just going to become more and more an expectation. So I'll put it out there again, just, like, when possible, having a project span as few teams as possible will get you much further ahead. Handoffs between teams, multi-team alignment. You don't want to be coupling your teams on projects. That's a recipe for moving very, very slowly. So only actually engage your data science team when you really have to. And then, yeah, treat them right.
Yeah, I think, I always like to bring it back down to, every conversation that you have with every stakeholder, with every team, has to go back down to the customer value and the problem that you're actually solving. When you're thinking about it from that perspective, everybody in their own domains will be able to take that away, and if there's enough context there for them, they can solve the problem themselves. Like, as a PM, you're not the solution provider. You're the one who's saying, here's what we're trying to solve. You set up the context, you provide the information that you need, and you allow your solution builders to build the solutions the way that they see fit. So really just letting, I'm not the designer, I let the designers do the design. So I'm not a data scientist, so why am I going to try to do any kind of data science-y things? But, in the same breath, it is helpful for a PM to have, maybe a little bit of familiarity with, your data models, your data architecture, so that you can at least, hold a conversation, talk through things, do a little bit of discovery with your teams. In the same way, you want to have a little bit of UX background so that when you're having a conversation with the designer, you can just kind of, not go toe-to-toe, but, carry the conversation forward so it's not a one-way street. So it does help to develop that skill set a little bit if you're going to be in the AI space, have a little bit of familiarity with the language and with the acronyms and the jargon so that you can, have a conversation, because at the end of the day, you're the grease for the wheels. You're the one who needs to keep those conversations going so the solutions can be built appropriately. So you need to have enough expertise to have that conversation with the people in the room. So definitely, again, that's kind of like a new space for PMs that want to get into AI, having, before, is your backend dev just does the data model however he wants to do the data. But now you have to actually think about now you have to build data models a certain way and data architecture a certain way so that you can actually train ML so that you can come out with the consumer outcomes that you really want and to deliver that value. So, being able to think that all the way through is beneficial, but not necessarily a requirement from a product perspective.
Did you have anything to add? You wanted to add there,
I always
Leah?
have something. So, I love that point. I think one of the things that's been really actually helpful for me and for any of the data teams that I've worked with is providing feedback. Is what they gave me the right thing? Did it solve the problem? That kind of stuff. Because in the same way that I want to have that kind of feedback, they don't know if their reporting, their analysis, the data that they give me, whatever they built for me worked. So how would they change anything to make it better the next time if I don't complete that feedback circle? And in the same respect, I found that including them in the full sort of product workflow, the life cycle, has been really helpful because they can get ahead of things. So even if the only thing that can happen, so whether you are a data scientist or you're a product person or someone in between, at least include people in kickoff meetings so that they can see the request coming. And often I've had folks reach out to me and be like, hey, by the way, it'd be really cool if you could do X. I can help you. But they can't do that if they're not informed about the ecosystem that you're working in right now.
Yeah, it's like any other you build a product and you put it out to your users and you test it and you take back the feedback and make iterations based off of that. You do that with your design work, so do that with your data work as well too, right?
Yeah.
It's really the original prompt engineering, right? Give them context, explain your stream of consciousness, and you'll get better answers.
does really come back, I think, Leah, to what you were saying as well, in terms of like just treating all your stakeholders right? And I think goes back to that as well. Now, it has been almost 30 minutes, so I think we're obligated to mention GPT-4, so I'll be the guy to do so. So, Forrest, you sort of alluded to it. You know, it's easier than ever to use pre-built tools, use an API that does some AI for you and tie it into your product. So, the question comes up, you know, yes, we can do that to lots of things, and people like Snapchat, you know, have a GPT-4 chatbot that's now available through it for whatever reason. So
it's so bad.
I'll take your word for it. Which brings up the question, right? It's just because we can do it, should we be doing it?
No.
And what are your thoughts on, you know, how do you make that decision about where you should be tying in AI or not? And yeah, when, how to make that decision?
It's, I mean, I think we've sort of covered, like, you gotta solve real customer problems. You can't be introducing change for change's sake. I've been talking to a number of CTO peers. Some of them, you know, really jumped on the bandwagon and shoved AI and ChatGPT onto like every field in the product and just like, you know, and no one's using those things because at the end of the day, people want to make their lives better. People don't like change just for the sake of change. And unless you're actually creating a step function improvement in their lives, you're not doing your job. You're just distracting or wasting resources. So you have to sort of really think about what does this technology do great, and where's like it not actually creating a better experience, right? Like taking a simple form that you can, you know, tap through with your thumb in 5 or 6 taps and making you sit there and type, that's not better. You know, it's trying to treat it like a database. This isn't great technology for a database. We have great databases. It's great at synthesizing information. It's great at generating, you know, interesting stories. But if you're using it to, you know, check facts, don't use it that way. There are any number of things that it's like bad at, but people are trying to shove it into everything. And you just have to really think critically about not just where can you know, do it, but if it's not making the product 10 times better, it's probably not the right spot to do it.
Yeah, that is honestly one of the biggest challenges for any company or any person who wants to introduce AI is the investment worth the return? Because, you know, it's not always black and white in terms of what that's going to look like. So, you know, again, like as a product manager does, you're going to look at, you know, the value that you're bringing to your customers, measure how much, you know, potentially revenue or acquisition metrics it can drive for your company or your organization, and see, you know, hey, if we invest, you know, 6 months into this, you know, AI product, is that actually going to bring that back to our users? And that can be a really hard thing to measure, because at the same time, you know, you don't want to just build an AI for the sake of using an AI in your system, because that could take a lot of time. I think one of the biggest, you know, I think there's just like a couple of examples where you really just kind of see, you know, multiple challenges where, you know, you have to build trust with your stakeholders. You have to make sure that the input equals the output or more. If you've never thought about having an AI in your system and you haven't built any of your data models or data architecture to be optimized for that, now you have to invest months, if not years of work to do that so that you can start actually building those things. And that's something that not every leadership team is going to want to do. Not every leadership team wants to invest, you know, 4 or 5 developers or data scientists to rebuild your data architecture so that you could support AI. So those are just like some examples where, yeah, it's a cool idea. Yeah, it could have a big impact on the world, but, you know, how much are you willing to invest to make that happen?
So, you know, I actually, where I met Forrest was at Nate in like 2016, I think. I think he had like 13 employees. Like he had no employees. It was great. That makes us sound old. That's only 10 years ago.
I had hair then.
The technology, you did not. Technology industry is so weird. Anywho, you know, but at the time I was a business analyst, and at the time the big conversation, because technology moves so fast, was really just around digitization, period. taking industries that were still pencil and paper, like if you look at huge swaths of, say, like heavy construction, or oil and gas, like there's a reason that Jobber does so well here, right? They're still using pen and paper, multiple copies. Like they've got superintendents driving around the city picking up photocopies of things. Like what? You know? And at the time when we were talking about opportunities for digitization, what are good opportunities for digitization? It's when you have a known entity that is a repeatable process with good data behind it, right? Those are the same those are the same sort of like factors that make for really good opportunities for AI. The same holds true, and you still have to understand them just as well, right? Repeatable processes, known entities, good data. So when you have those things, you can follow through. But in the same respect, a lot of these opportunities, sometimes you don't need to go all the way through to AI. Simple digitization is more than enough. It's cheap, it's quick, it's easy. And I would actually argue that the opportunity for AI there is actually in terms of things like Copilot, writing the code that can build those things infinitely faster. So it's not about the product itself, it's about the tools that build the product. And that's like where my heart is kind of at right now. I would also argue to a certain extent, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit here, there is an opportunity here, though, to build things for the sake of building them, if you can build them cheap. Like, if you can put a plugin in and just see what happens, and it's low risk, do it. Why not? You know what I mean? You still have to do all your risk analysis and all that kind of stuff, and that's good. But, like, this is an opportunity to actually, like, break free of some of these constraints that we've had for a really long time. And one of the things that I'll say a lot is not to solution. You hear this all the time in the product space. Don't worry about the solution. But this is one time where I think we have a really big opportunity, because speaking of bias, all of us have these ingrained bias. Like, and the longer you're in the industry, the longer you think that things are immovable. There are certain constraints I just can't get past. Like I said, integration is hard. Doing diagrams is hard. Everybody hates doing documentation. It sucks. You know, like all of these things. But what if we could solve for that, right? Like one of the things that I found really interesting, so when we were talking about like the things that are different between when we did this presentation or when we did this panel 3 years ago, AI could clean up your data for you. That is an opportunity for AI. Right? So now will we get to a point where you don't have to have clean data in order to have these models? That's a possibility. It's at least something we should be considering. So that's where I do think that as product people, we need to have our finger on the pulse a little bit to know what are some of the existing solutions so that I can break some of my own biases that I've been building about things where I didn't even consider something because I was like, oh, that's too hard. So I haven't even looked at it. Because, you know, you always do the like effort versus value kind of evaluation. And if you had always thought that the effort was up here and the value is here, you wouldn't do it, right? But if the effort has suddenly tumbled to here and the cost has remained the same, now the value is up here and that math is suddenly way different, right? So it's trying to think, like break some of the rules that we've all had for the last 10, 15 years, I think it's going to be really, really important. And that's how we're going to start to innovate, is thinking like, but why not? Why not just break it out? Like, as much as I'm making fun of the Snapchat AI, which if you haven't seen it, it's hysterical. It's like a companion and you can't remove it. And I know this because I have a 17-year-old. I know, I look very young. It's fine. I made mistakes early in life. It's fine. But my 17-year-old kills herself laughing because she's interacting with this bot all the time, just torturing it. And she's like, this is horrible. But I'm like, actually, from a product perspective and as a grown-up, I'm stepping back being like, this is a genius experiment. It probably costs them next to nothing. They are getting boatloads of feedback. They're learning so much about how they can incorporate this thing in other ways. Incredible experiment. Cost them next to nothing, and nobody's leaving the platform because of it. Terrific experiment. So as much as and that's the thing, we made fun of it, but it's a great experiment. You got to like abstract yourself out of it and really think like, why are smart people doing stupid things sometimes? And this is one of them.
If I could build on two of the points that were made, I think one sort of theme that's come up a little bit here, which I think is fantastic, is just that reminder to everybody thinking about product that, like, you are not your user. You know, everybody who's here at this talk is pretty aware of this, is pretty excited by this, is going to jump on board pretty quickly. That is not, like, most industries have a lot of momentum behind them. You know, Jobber's 13 years old. For at least 10 of those years, we've been substantially better than pen and paper for your business. We have hundreds of thousands of customers. The vast majority of the market is still on pen and paper today. There's a lot of hype about how this thing's going to disrupt overnight, right? You know, these products are going to come out that wipe out whole industries. And, you know, maybe in a year from now, it will have the capability to be significantly better than how it is today. But that doesn't mean that in a year from now, suddenly the whole industry switches over and starts using the new product. It takes a really long time for people to switch to a measurably better product. Change is hard for a lot of people. Some great books about, like, crossing the chasm if you get interested. But you know, you're going to get really excited. You're going to build really cool things on this technology and then be flabbergasted why no one's adopting them. So I'm just going to hand that out as a bit of a warning. I think the other great point made is just how, less on the front-end productization, but internally to building businesses, the incremental cost of running a business, particularly starting a business, is just going to get cheaper and cheaper, which is going to change the game in a lot of ways. But if you're at an existing established business, you really have to take that seriously. You have to start moving substantially faster to maintain your lead from new entrants who are going to be able to close that gap faster than ever. And you have to start thinking differently about your value proposition. You know, how can you be using your data, as an example, your users, to create defensible moats where you can offer a feature where somebody can't just ascribe it to ChatGPT and do it because it's powered off of unique data that only you have. Or it doesn't have to be data. There are other lots of existing moats, but you have to think differently, because just, you know, we've had engineers working on this longer than other people is not going to be a reason you win anymore.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's going to be one of, like, the biggest changes that we see, especially with, like, the ChatGPT coming up, right? Like, we had, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, every AI startup was trying to do speech to text. And, you know, when you're trying to do speech to text, you're competing with, you know, Google and IBM with, you know, your own speech to text platforms. But now they've built something that is incredibly accessible to everybody, every startup. And now, instead of building our own speech to text, we're going to use that one and build platforms or apps that leverage that and really get us to the like solving a consumer issue more quickly and more directly. Now, instead of us having to, like, build our own platform that's going to help us solve that problem, we've got a platform that's going to let us get to that solution a lot quicker and a lot more directly. Again, kind of like saving time and money and resources from startups, and, you know, potentially opening up a whole world. I don't know how long it's going to take for, you know, people to adopt this, or for companies to adopt it, but it'll be really interesting to kind of see how people incorporate it, kind of how you were saying, you know, with their own data to leverage, you know, this new user interface for their consumers.
Absolutely wonderful. We're almost out of time, but maybe if we can really quickly, I think there's one topic that we sort of touched on a few times here today, but I think that's worth maybe explicitly pointing out as well. It's this sort of the thought process around working on internal products to make your internal operations better and faster versus external products that, you know, potentially connect to AI and are AI powered on both sides, internal and external. Just maybe really quickly, what are your thoughts, and, like, how does your thinking shift when you're sort of thinking about internal versus external?
Yeah, I actually love this topic. So the product that I manage, the API marketplace, this, like, heart of Telus, as it were, like, literally all of our APIs through all of Telus go through this thing. What's really unique about it, though, is though it's got a lot of dev tools built into it, obviously it is a marketplace for APIs. It's also external facing, and my vision for it is for it to eventually go, like, full public. So the way that I'm looking at it, honestly, is, like, the biggest use for AI within what we're doing right now. So there's two parts. One is that we're really looking to operationalize as fast as possible. I want my devs to be able to build more stuff faster. And I want it to be better quality. I want there to be fewer bugs. I want the tests to basically write themselves. We're looking at diagram as code, which is incredible. I love that. Like, and one of the really cool opportunities that we have is just like baking, like really daisy chaining a lot of these different tools and resources together to make them incredibly powerful. So we're really looking at that in particular, but then there's other opportunities as well. So one of the really big pushes that we're doing right now is all of our documentation is going down as Markdown. There's nothing in a Google Doc or Confluence or anything, and there's a very, very, very good reason for that. And one of the things is being able to identify the gaps across our entire product, like our customer-facing product suite. So if I can get every one of my product owners across TELUS to just tell me what their product is and give me a list of features, this is something we've never been able to do before at a company of our scale, is what are all of the features that our products offer? What are all of the gaps, and can we compare it to our competitors? And then how do we fill them really, 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 really fast? And if it's in Markdown, I can do that in a heartbeat, which is amazing. Like, I'm genuinely so excited about it, especially because we know that the next step is not having POs write the documentation. It's having the AI write the documentation for us based on the code. And this is all going to be in the same repository. So I think it's almost like when I'm looking at sort of my external facing products, what I want to look at is the user experience. But I know that that starts at the guts, right? I'm a huge advocate, if anybody has ever heard me talk about this, for support documentation. I love it. It's the best, but you really shouldn't need much of it. And like, how do you get it into people's hands? How do you keep it updated? All these things. And these are all opportunities for AI, because people care when your shit breaks. Like, when stuff breaks, it's the worst, and we have no documentation for it. It's hard to read, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's like the gap that I'm most excited about filling for our customer-facing stuff. The other one too, honestly, maybe you've seen our products. We're a very small company. We know that it can be faster, and sometimes it's just an opportunity. You don't even know which step along this chain is the one slowing you down. So an opportunity to throw some of our data analysts at those problems and say, like, pick the one pivotal point in this entire value chain that is it, that is going to shift things for all of our customers. I think those are some of the cool opportunities that we're seeing.
I think this is a question that will really vary based off the size of business. When you're just getting started or early stage, you're still trying to build a product, because you want a product to then build a company around. So there's really not much point in optimizing a company around a product that does, like, you're still figuring out.
Premature optimization.
Yeah. At our scale, though, it's I think the internal opportunities are the ones that are going to come much, much faster. Mm-hmm. Like, we're already turning on, because we deal with a lot more scale, right? Like, do you know how many times our customer support team has to answer the same questions each day? Like, time to get those off. Or like having smarter like sales flow, marketing emails, escalation paths. Like, we can automate a lot of the repetitive toil work that happens within a business at our scale, where we have 80 people doing a very predictable job within a day. Those are opportunities to remove some of the toil and elevate them to doing different, more intellectual forms of work. When it comes to the external, also just it's enough people that there's a lot of repetition, but few enough people that's a lot easier change management. Changing things on customers, very, very difficult. Changing things, we can just go to those 80 support people and go, hey, we're trying something new this week, and they'll all roll with it.
Just an all hands and get her done.
Yeah, you cannot do that with your customers in the same way. Obviously, long term, like, we are a product company. We love building product. I'm assuming most of the people who are here at the product management talk are interested in product. So we all know that the opportunities long term for this technology are really exciting, but short term, as in like, from weeks ago to weeks from now, the opportunities to start flipping switches and just plugging things in and having an impact is substantial.
Yeah, and I'll just be quick, just because we only got 8 minutes there. We have, the way I kind of look at it is like, whether you're building it internal or external, again, you kind of just look at the value that you're doing and the cost that it takes to integrate with something that's external versus building it yourself, right? Does it actually deliver on all the things that like what problem are you trying to solve? Does that external tool, solve the problems for you? How much work do you have to do to optimize it to fit your processes? And if you can build something faster in-house that will result in something that's more suited to your needs, then sometimes that's the more appropriate choice, right? So, yeah, that's all I'll add on that one.
Okay, thank you very much, Forrest, Nathan, and Leah. We do have a few minutes left here for questions, so at this point we'll turn it over to the audience, and I see a few hands up already. Do we have a mic runner in the room?
Hello. First of all, thank you very much to all of you for your time. Lovely discussion. I'm real excited. The question I have is kind of bringing together 2 points that were mentioned earlier. So, Leah, we're talking about that sometimes you don't have to go all the way to AI, while Forrest was mentioning we may need to change the way we view and deliver value. So my question is, there's a lot of excitement when it comes to data, ML, AI. These are all buzzwords. How do we take that excitement? How do we channel that excitement into a value delivery engine? And what I mean by that is, how do we get those folks, my team of data scientists, engineers, who raise their hands and say, I can build the next big ML AI model, while they may be better off with a rule-based system? So how do we go about that? That's a challenge that I see every day. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
This is actually really funny because right now we're working on a talent matchmaking tool, right? So we're trying to find candidates and place them with startup companies. And it's just, based off of some attributes that they give us and a couple attributes that the companies give us, make a match. And every time I talk about it, somebody's always like, oh, are you going to be doing an AI with that? And I'm like, it's just logic. It's just matchmaking. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to do that or make that investment. Could we potentially one day enhance it with that? Yeah, we could. But it just really doesn't make sense for the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think just to kind of really answer your question, the biggest thing there is, have all those people in the room and have those conversations where, how much effort is this going to take? What's the cost that it's going to be to develop that model versus just doing a logic matchmaking piece, right? Is a logic matchmaking piece going to be easily replicated by using machine learning? Is it going to be enhanced by using machine learning? What does that potentially look like? And really trying to play out all those different scenarios. I think that's one of the things that we're really struggling to. One thing that I just haven't seen a lot of on the market is just kind of seeing, data scientists that are building ML models with developers, with product managers working together. When you're trying to come up with a solution and how you want to build the next big thing that uses AI, really try to take all of those things into account together and trying to come up with a solution that truly does solve a problem for a consumer at the end of the day. What are you building? How long is it going to take? How quickly can you get it to market? And when you get it to market, who's going to buy it? You got to use the same, principles for starting a business in AI as you do anywhere else, and that shouldn't change. And that's something that I think is lacking a little bit still in the ecosystem, but is definitely something that we're starting to see more of. I was just talking to people last night, and they're like, these students that are working on their masters and their PhDs, now instead of just talking about the models that they're working on, they're talking about how they're going to take it to market, and I think that's really, really cool to hear.
We go left or right, or?
Whichever way you prefer.
I think numbers remove a lot of BS. What is the goal? Not just a flashy elevator pitch or some cool pictures, but is this going to make the customers' lives 10% better, 20% better? How much better will their problem be? How much more would they be willing to pay for it? if no one believes anybody would pay any more for it, it's probably not actually helping anybody. It's probably not actually a good use of time. It's hype. It's splash. It's like you're getting caught up in the moment. Just push people that next step to like, predict the numbers, explain to me why, give me some justification, and that will cut through a lot of it. But the other thing is also just, like, as we've talked about, if it's cheap, standard product principle, experiment, experiment, experiment. Just, like, if it's really cheap, you never know. Maybe it will be a great idea.
Yeah, I'll throw out 2 points that hopefully will be helpful to like a decent number of you in the room. Point number 1 is come back to the software development best practices, right? Modularity, testability, scalability, usability, all these things. So yes, we could absolutely build it with simple logic that we know. Maybe you can make a case, though, that you're right, guys. You can absolutely do it that way. I can do it for 1 more day, but it will be infinitely more scalable. It will be easier to test. You'll be able to modularize it. You'll be able to like change this into a product. Like if you can show additional value above and beyond, you're already on track, right? Like and it's nice because coming back to those principles, those are simple ones that you can use over and over again. It's a framework that we all recognize in the industry, right? It's a shared language, which makes it easy, and it's a good sell. The other one, too, is you all need to empower yourself with understanding where the business is going, right? I see time and time again, especially when we're looking at more junior folks, that they're looking at the problems that are too small. They're looking at, like we have 25 tickets about X. It's like, great, but we're losing $25 billion on Y. Like if you understood the higher level business objectives and then you can ladder that up, you can show how that initiative is going to help solve that problem. And especially if that initiative has a KPI and you can show what percentage of that KPI you're going to help hit. Numbers, man. But it's not just numbers, but it's telling a story with numbers, right? Because you can give me numbers and you can be, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to save you $5,000. Yeah, I'm going to say, that's great. I don't care. X is saving me $25 million. Like, I don't care because you haven't thought about the big picture of the company. Almost all companies will tell you what their objectives are, what their targets are, what their business strategies are. If you just ask, empower yourself with that information, that's how you're going to get ahead.
We're just about out of time. Can we take one more? Let's take one more and try to get through it really quickly.
So Silicon Valley gave us the rainforest model of regional innovation ecosystems, and they specified 2 keystone or cornerstone species, one being connectors, people like Stephanie Enders, and the other being project developers or managers. And I'm wondering, where do we find a freelance product manager in Alberta, especially for startups?
Product Edmonton. Product Edmonton on Slack is a great community. Talk to Nathan. No, but for real, like I'm not trying to be facetious. It is. It's a great community. It's got all different levels of folks coming out of those programs. I would also say that like the information management diploma or degree program, like the business degree program out of the U of A, produces really excellent folks that want to get into product, as well as the Comp Sci program. That's another one. A lot of people graduate from Comp Sci and realize they don't actually want to write code, but they love technology. Excellent place if you need people that are incredibly brilliant, driven, want to get going, and are willing to work for a startup. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, it's the product management community has grown a lot over the last 5 to 10 years. Even when I started, Product Edmonton was 6 people hanging out at the bar, and now we get like 100 people to our events now. So it's like it's grown a lot, but it can be really challenging for young people to get into product management because every company is looking for somebody who's got 3 to 10 years of experience to start, and companies can't and companies are struggling to find that because a lot of our ecosystem right now is too young to be able to have 3+ years of experience for that. So, if you can't find a product manager who's, part-time or fractional, lean on your domain experts. Lean on somebody who's got really strong customer empathy, business acumen, familiarity with, communicating with developers and communicating strategy as well too. They might not be labeled a product manager, but if they have those skill sets, they could probably fill the role really well, right? And somebody who can just learn along the way. I think one thing that we can ask, our companies, in Edmonton and Alberta is, take a risk on, take a chance on people who don't necessarily have, 3+ years of product management experience. Try to find the skill sets that might help feed into that. Find somebody with those skills that could potentially learn what it means to be a product manager and try to develop them that way. I think that's something we're starting to see a little bit more of, but we're it's growing from all sorts of places. But yeah, Product Edmonton's a really good place to find lots of people with those skill sets. So happy to introduce you to some potential fractional PMs.
Also, as somebody that just recently hired, I think 3 new product folks, LinkedIn, honest to God, especially if you can go remote. I am a big fan of saying honest to God, there's no reason my job can't be remote. I'm 100% remote, and I work with teams all over the place, multiple teams, multiple products, multiple projects, yada, yada, yada. If it can be remote, you're going to get a lot better luck. And I would also say, don't turn your back on business analysts. It is nearly the same profession, and there are a lot more of them. And honestly, this is really crummy, but they're underpaid a lot of the time. So you can actually scoop them up, and giving them a little bit of autonomy and authority is often what they've been looking for. So there's the IIBA that's here in Edmonton. You can reach out to them. There's also Nate's IT business analyst program. That's a great one. And they always have a co-op program that you can participate in, 4-month co-op. So you can grab students right out of there.
I have some thoughts on this, but we're over time, so come find me after.
Ditto.
Thanks, Forrest. Yeah, sorry about that, folks. We are 3 minutes over, so I do want to try to get you out almost on time. So thank you again very much to Nathan, Forrest, and Leah. Really appreciate your bringing your experience to the table and sharing it with the audience here today. So thank you very much.